What's up, everybody? Watch check. What are we wearing? TISO PRX in red. Tasty little number. Not a lot of money. We're going to talk politics today. So if you are groaning inwardly or going, ugh, that's cool. Go watch my video I just posted on why I think TISO is the best Swiss brand. Maybe that's more to your liking. But we're going to talk politics today, which I haven't done a whole lot of recently. Two major topics of discussion. It's now been confirmed that there was a whole lot of voter fraud in Georgia in 2020. And all the people that were called crazy and conspiracy theorists, put another check in the column for them as for a win. Because once again, we were right on this. People called us crazy, and now that it's too late to do anything about it, now they're going and admitting it, which has happened with COVID and whole tons of other shit. We got the Epstein files dropped. I guess we're going to have three topics. And then the third topic is going to be addressed to Charlie Kirk haters and why they're idiots. Now, if you disagree with Charlie Kirk, that doesn't mean you're an idiot. You have a difference of opinion and that's it. Whatever. But when I say hater, I'm talking about a very specific person, and we'll elaborate. I go over just some of the dumb shit I've been dealing with in the comment section for a while now. So, I don't know where we're going. I'm just going to tool around. So, remember, back in 2020, the election, there was some weird things going on with Georgia. Those of us that were paying attention noticed we're at a red state. Georgia's been a red state for a long time. Solidly red. Yeah, you'll elect a couple blue in Atlanta, but the state itself has been red. We all go to bed that night with Trump with a very comfortable lead, to where they were like, yeah, this should be in the bag. And there were reports that as the polls closed, and someone I think even grabbed video or something like that at the time, of people, poll workers in Fulton and what other county? I know it was Fulton and one other, but Fulton was the main one. The bluest, that's the bluest in the county in the state. Pulling out bins from under tables and tablecloths of ballots and putting them in with the others in the back room. And they're like, where did those come from? Because we went to bed with Trump having a really significant lead. And this is about law. I don't care. We're not talking about policy. We're not talking about what you think of Trump. This is irrelevant to that. This is about the law and how votes are supposed to be tabulated according to the state laws. And Fulton County admitted that they completely violated election laws. That's all this is about. I don't care if you don't like Trump. Doesn't matter. It could be Abbott versus Costello or Larry versus Curley. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. So set that aside, set apart your feelings for Trump, and just focus on the facts as they are coming out right now. And what those are is there's a step for absentee ballots because you're not presenting ID. People are just mailing them in or dropping them out of drop boxes. When you go to the ballot box, you show ID. Your name has to be on the list of registered voters. You vote there. They give you one ballot. You scan that ballot. There are some checks and balances to certify that you are you and you are turning in one and only one ballot. And if it scans your ballot properly when it goes into the box, it tells you your vote has been counted, or there was a problem, redo it, right? There are checks and balances to certify that these are legit votes. Mail-in ballots, you don't know who's mailing them in. I mean, I could put people's names on them and drop them in a drop box. I could drop them in the mail. There's no way of verifying who they are other than a ballot was mailed to that person and a ballot came back. That's it. So those have extra steps. Those have to be certified and inspected to make sure the information all matches and everything looks good, signed off by an official of the election board, and it has to have 2 witnesses present. And I think the way it works is 1 from each party. They want to make sure that we're all agreeing, yes, this looks to be valid. And if it doesn't, if the name's misspelled, if the address is wrong, if it's not filled out properly, by law, those ballots are not valid, and they are to be discarded into a separate box and not counted. That's the law. Now you could say, well, that means their vote didn't count because of a typo. Yeah, it's like that in every state. This is how it works. In every single election, a whole shit ton of votes are thrown out because they don't match, the person's in the wrong county, the address is wrong, something doesn't look right, and so those votes are not counted. Like it or hate it, that's how it works. It's always worked that way. It's like that in every state. Turns out, Georgia in Fulton County, let me preface this by saying, when they say Biden won, he barely won. He won by 0.23%, just less than 0.25%. It amounted to 11,000 votes and change. That is what decided Georgia. Georgia is what decided the election that year, because Georgia's 16 electoral college votes, when you think about it, if one side loses that state, they lose 16. The other side gets the 16. It makes a big difference, and that was what tipped the scales towards Biden. He needed, which is why everything came down to Georgia, and there were lawsuits and stuff, because the numbers weren't adding up. He went to bed, all of us went to bed with Trump heavily in the lead, and you wake up and all of a sudden it's reversed. Magically, Fulton County found a shit ton of votes, and we're like, what? How does the math isn't mathing? And you remember Trump's now infamous phone call to Rothenberg or whoever. Hey, you find my votes. He was referring to the fact that the Democrats just seem to find hundreds of thousands of them, and nobody knows where they came from or how they got there. And so he's like, yeah, how about you find some for me? You found, it wasn't election tampering. It was like, this is bullshit. He was only behind by 11,000 votes in a state with 11 million people. Now, not all of them are voters, obviously, but the margin was so razor thin, it just didn't make sense that Georgia just suddenly flipped in the middle of the night to blue when everyone was asleep. And all these votes just popped up out of nowhere and couldn't really be accounted for. Well, it turns out there were 315,000 votes in the most blue county of the state that were counted that legally should not have been. Those votes were illegal. They should have been kicked out because they weren't filled out properly for all the reasons I mentioned before, in accordance with state election laws. They counted them anyway. And that put Biden over the top and changed the outcome. Changed the outcome of that election. When you think about that one act, put Biden in power, a president with clear dementia, all the things that happened after that, the poor handling of the shutdowns, all the shit that happened with COVID, wrecking people's jobs, impacting people's education, trashing the economy. You had the border crisis that we're dealing with now and all the ICE shit because Biden changed the policy and let 11 million unvetted people just walk in. No questions asked. You had the war in Ukraine that started after our disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, and many analysts look at that and go, well, that was the moment that Russia and our enemies realized, holy shit, America's in trouble. They've got an idiot, and whether you think Trump's an idiot or not, people didn't, our enemies were afraid of Trump. They might have laughed at him and said, oh, he's a buffoon, But they didn't fuck with him because they're like, he's liable to bomb us or cut us off financially or do something crazy. They looked at him as a bit of a cowboy and knew that if they messed with him, bad shit would happen. They got Biden in there and realized he's not even in charge. This guy's not even running the country. His underlings are, and they're covering this up. They have intelligence agencies and all that shit. They knew what was going on. They could see his decline just like the rest of us could. And when we saw us pull out of Afghanistan that way, that sent a clear signal that the people in charge were not competent and would not make the right, decisions militarily. So Russia moved into Ukraine, started that war, all this other stuff. All because this domino effect that we said at the time, something's not right about this Georgia thing. And you had Obama appointed judges throwing cases out that had merit. No, and it's borderline treason to question the results of the election. And now they've come out and said 5 years after the fact, when there's nothing you can do about it, Biden's already come and gone, that you know what, but it's okay now because we've got new people in charge, we've got new protections in place to make sure this doesn't happen again. Fulton County tampered with, and dare I say, stole an election for Biden. That happened. You may not like it, you're going to try to argue with me about it. Don't give a shit. That's what happened. They counted 315,000 votes in the bluest, highest concentration in Georgia. Votes that should not have counted. And when you pull in 315,000 votes, the majority of which are going to go to Biden, and Biden only won by 11,000, there goes that whole margin of victory that Trump had the night before, that we all thought we were going to wake up to a re-election of President Trump, because it came down to basically Georgia, only to find that where the hell did all these votes come from? How did Biden pull and flip the state blue? You go into certain parts of Atlanta, you saw a bunch of Biden-Harris stickers. That's it. The rest of the state, there are still people in my area that have Trump signs up in their lawn. Like, Georgia is a Trump state. And it never made sense to us, but we were silenced on social media. We were told that we're conspiracy theorists and we're crazy and no way our elections could be tampered with. And we find out now they 100% were. And all the problems we're dealing with right now, that they're blaming on Trump, that were caused by Biden and his horrible policies, and the fact that he was absent, and auto pen, and just all this shit that went on for 4 years, with a dementia. Like, I'm not even joking, I'm not calling him a name, but the guy has dementia. The guy is not in control of his faculties. We all saw that in that debate. They hid it as long as they could, but they had to put him on stage in front of the country and hope that the Adderall and all the shit they gave him kept him fairly lucid for an hour. And it fell apart. That whole house of cards, everything they've been lying about, that they knew about, and had worked really, really hard with the media, social media, big tech to cover up for most of his presidency. The lid blew off it, couldn't hide it anymore, so they yanked him out and undemocratically appointed Harris, the nominee, without a single vote being cast for her. And we saw what happened. Led to a landslide victory for Trump. But there was a lot of damage done in that 4 years. And now Fulton County has admitted to, quote unquote, the problem. It wasn't a problem. They didn't forget to sign off on those. They didn't forget what the law was, what their job was. They knew that it was coming down to Georgia. So they slipped those in and assumed nobody would notice, and if it did, it'd be too late to do anything about it, which is exactly what happened. and my side was maligned. They tried pressing charges against Trump for election tampering, for suggesting that the election was stolen, and trying to coerce them to find his votes and all this nonsense. And it was all built on a house of lies. It was all built on bullshit. And now we know that. It's not me saying that. Fulton County has now admitted it. They admitted the problem and promised to fix it. It's too late. You tipped the scales knowingly to get your guy in the office. All the lawsuits, all the bullshit, the fake charges, the false felony claims of 34 felonies because he paid off a whore to go away, which isn't a felony. It's not even a crime. All of that, everything that's been going on for 4 years comes down to that one pivotal action that some people in Fulton County, Georgia, on the election board decided, you know what? All those ballots that are over there that normally we have to throw out, just toss them in. Mix them in with the rest, count them. We'll worry about the problem. We'll deal with it later, if it ever comes up, if we even get caught. That is what they did. People should be in jail for that, but instead, people were saying, well, it's treasonous to even question the results, and that you're not a patriot, and you're a bad American, and you're just a bad person. If you even talked about the problem in Georgia and said that Georgia cheated, Georgia lied, whatever, that is the thing with liberals. They accuse you of what they themselves are doing. I'll put links to this up in the description. But it's now, it's as official as it's going to get, that Fulton County messed up big time, and it wasn't by accident. Because you notice that these things never seem to accidentally favor a Republican. Nobody just finds hundreds of thousands of votes under a desk and then forgets to certify them and forgets to get witnesses and forgets to check the addresses. This doesn't seem to happen to our side. You'd think if it was just human error, and law of averages says people are going to make mistakes and they're under a hard deadline and corners get cut. But how come it only seems to benefit the one side? I can't think of another example on a large scale like this. Over the years, it was like, God, what was up in Michigan or Wisconsin? There was some political activist group that was going around and rounding up homeless people, registering them to vote, giving them cartons of cigarettes to take them to register to vote and get absentee ballots, shit like that. It was like all kinds of stuff over the years. But when you talk about this, a bunch of people in the comments are going to sit there and tell me, oh, I'm lying and I'm this and I'm that and I'm brainwashed and bootlicker and whatever other focus group terms they think, are going to resonate with people. And they're not considering the fact that if this was the other way around, they'd be rioting in the streets. That the election was stolen. They tried it in 2000. Florida stole the election. No, they didn't. Bush won. Barely, but he won. They had multiple recounts. The newspapers went in and did exhaustive recounts after the fact. No matter how many times they counted, using what method of counting dimpled chads, every single time, New York Times, Washington Post, USA Today, Miami Herald, Bush came up in above Gore every single time. And some of them, he increased his lead. Yet there's still people today that say that was stolen. There's still people today that say the 2016 election was hacked by the Russians. The election wasn't hacked. Clinton had an illegal in violation of federal law, which, if convicted of that, would bar her from being president, would bar her from eligibility to be president, kept an illegal server as Secretary of State with confidential information on it, and the Russians hacked it. Yeah, her password was password. Seriously, that's how they gained access to that server and the 30,000 confidential emails and all the shit that she said didn't exist. And then she got caught destroying when they were under a congressional subpoena and having her underlings use hammers to smash cell phones and Blackberries and use bleach bit and all this stuff to wipe out the evidence. That was evidence tampering. She committed felonies and never served any jail time for it. And they're saying that our side stole it because she's an idiot and broke the law with the server. And the reason she had that illegal server was because if it was on a government server, there would be backups. It would be subject to freedom of information requests. Anything on that could be subpoenaed. So when she was selling access through her phony her foundation, the Clinton Foundation, where her and her husband made $150 million off of, selling access to Obama and, with foreign dignitaries, and, well, if you make a sizable donation, I can make sure you get a meeting with the president and all that shit. She had all those emails going through her private server so that the government wouldn't back them up, and then at later time someone could go in and read all that shit and bring it up in court. That's why she had the private server. That's why she destroyed it after Congress issued an official subpoena. That in itself is destruction of evidence. Thousands of crimes, felonies. That is enough to put you in jail for life. Nothing happened because you're Clinton. Which brings us to the next thing, the Epstein list. The list and the files that Biden had for 4 years and never released. They said there was no list. They said there was nothing in there. It was a Republican conspiracy theory. Notice the theme today. When Republicans were asking for the list and the information, Biden refused to release the stuff. His Department of Justice under Merrick Garland said, no, there's nothing there. It's a hoax. It's a Republican boogeyman. Okay. Trump gets in office. Democrats start demanding the list. And like, wait, the list you said didn't exist, that you said was a conspiracy last Thursday? Now you think is the smoking gun for Trump, but you didn't use it prior to the election? Really? But are we really supposed to believe this stuff? And I'd say, do they think we're this stupid? But, I mean, look around you. I mentioned this in the comments a couple times. The average IQ in America, well, I guess probably even globally, but at least in America, is 98 to 100 points. Anything under 80, you're considered retarded or learning disabled. The average American is only 20 points higher than being clinically diagnosed as retarded. And I know everybody thinks they're relatively intelligent. Yeah, you can get up and go to work and tie your own shoes and, be a part of society. But the average person isn't that intelligent. And so, when you see this, yeah, they do think that we're that stupid. I happen to be 40 or 50 points higher than the average, and that's not a flex, that's what it is. And maybe that's why I don't get along with stupid people, because I'm looking at something going, 2 plus 2 is 4. Like, this is not that complex, and people just can't wrap their minds around it. They're being emotional. You're like, but here's the fact, here's the proof. Nope. So people have been saying shit about Trump and Epstein for years. Yeah, they knew each other. Yeah, they posed for a couple pictures many years ago. Turns out a lot of other people posed pictures with him. Of course, Trump wasn't naked in a bathtub with underage girls like Clinton and all these other celebrities that are in hot tubs and swimming pools, and the girls' young faces, the victims, are all redacted. None of those have Trump in it. Now, they tried to pretend one, and it was from a beauty pageant. It was a public picture that's been out for years with Trump with a bunch of 20-year-olds, 22, 23-year-olds. But they redacted it. This is how dishonest the Democrats are. They went through and they knew the list was going to have to be delivered on was it yesterday or the day before? And all that stuff was due by court order to be released. So they released a picture to make it sound like, oh yeah, this is one of the pictures, like all the ones you're about to see, to soften the blow and make it sound like Trump was part of that. That was 100% deceit. Deceit. That was 100% a lie. That was a picture from, I think it was a Hawaiian Tropic or something like that. He owned beauty contests. And the girls all said, were interviewed, like he was a total gentleman, he was the epitome of a gentleman, and he was respectful and classy. There's nothing there. The picture's been out for years with adult women who were not victims and had nothing to do with Epstein. But that's what that's how desperate they are. If you have to lie and fabricate shit like that, that means you know you're fucked. That means you know some big shit's about to drop and you're trying to get out ahead of it. You're trying to muddy the waters and make it sound like, well, it's not so bad. See, their guy did it too. And that was a complete fabrication that was debunked in about 25 minutes. Because people looking at that picture going, wow, other than the faces being redacted, it looks like this picture that's been online for years. It was in the papers and with adult women and no victims and no Epstein link. And they're like, sure enough, the Democrats just took on a picture with a bunch of women and hashed out their faces so it would look like the photos they were being forced to release of Clinton and Biden and Kevin Spacey and a whole shitload of Hollywood and Wall Street liberal elites in much more compromising pictures. Meanwhile, nothing in there about Trump. Yeah, Trump knew him, so did half of Hollywood. The guy was a major investor. He knew people all over the place. Managed lots of funds and shit like that. He was a donor. Just because you had a picture with him at a luncheon or something like that doesn't mean you were banging underage girls on the island. But there's a whole bunch of pictures of Clinton with underage girls on his lap. Nothing about Trump, though. Trump, most people didn't realize, had been working with the FBI under the final year of Biden to help expose and spill dirt on Epstein. Trump was the first one to raise the alarm on him that this guy is a creep. He kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago because he was getting grabby with one of his employees. And Trump was having none of that, kicked him out, severed all ties with him. Years before anybody else knew about this shit. And Trump was working almost in the capacity of like an informant with the FBI, giving the details. And yet they're trying to make it, they're trying to spin this. Go watch the movie Wag the Dog. That's exactly what's been going on. The Democrats use the media. You could say, oh, the Republicans do. The Republicans don't have any media other than Fox News. They got one. That's it. The Democrats have, I know everyone thinks the Republicans are the party of the rich. They're not. When you look at all the big names on Wall Street, when you look at, you got Elon Musk, and you'll find maybe 2 or 3 others that you could name, if that. But when you look at Zuckerberg and Bezos and Soros, and you go down the list of all the big Hollywood moguls, the heads of Google and Apple and all these other big tech companies, all these big rich billionaires and influential people, the vast majority are on the left, not the right. Go look it up. Go look at their posts and tweets. Most of them are never Trumpers and hate Trump and constantly bitching about conservatives. They are not on our side. And in the end, they're not on your side either. They're on their side. You know, this thing in Georgia is especially disturbing because you're like, okay, we said this was going on. They lied about us and said we were liars and crazy people, and now they've admitted it. But it makes you wonder, where else has this been done? Do you think this is a one-time oopsie, complete mistake and nothing was intended? No one believes that, not even you. You'll say that because you'd rather win the internet argument than Instead of try to actually be right and admit that you're probably wrong on this, but it to me is really crazy that that happened, and to think that it wouldn't happen again. Look at Pelosi. Look at Ilhan Omar. Look at all these people that get into politics that make less money a year than I do, and yet in 7 years they're worth $30 million. Nancy Pelosi's stock trades, I saw a graph looking at it over the years. She has outperformed the S&P 500, the stock market, all the major investment firms, the leading analysts by like a magnitude of 17 times over, or something insane. Her return on her investments are unprecedented. The amount of money she's made buying and selling stocks, all of the best analysts in the world with all their AI tools can't even get close to her track record. I try not to speak in complete absolutes because there's always going to be an exception. But I'm going to say it's as close to impossible as you can possibly get to buy and sell stocks with that percentage of a return on investment as Nancy Pelosi has, unless you have really good, consistent inside information. You can't be like 19,000 or whatever, 1900%. It just, the numbers are so off the chart. All the smartest, most experienced analysts and firms on Wall Street and elsewhere that make their livings off of predicting of buying and selling stocks with all the computer models and everything else. And she outpaced them by many, many magnitudes. You're telling me that 90-year-old woman is a better investor than all of them? Or does she get inside information as Speaker of the House that she passes on to her investor and her husband when to buy and sell and what stocks? Nobody in the history of the stock market, and I mean that sincerely, has ever had that track record. No one has ever come close. So how is she doing it if it's not illegal? How about Ilhan Omar? She makes less than I do. She comes to this country from Somalia because she married her brother, whatever, to get around to get around the immigration law, which people said was fake, and now it turns out is true. And now she's worth $30 million. Look at what AOC's worth. If you think that that kind of money doesn't corrupt people, and that you wouldn't cheat in elections or politics in general to make tens or hundreds of millions of dollars over time if you're there long enough, you're insane. Everybody thinks that CEOs, they're rich and greedy and they'll screw you over to make $1 million bonus. Okay, well, why do you think politicians? How do politicians be worth tens of millions of dollars in relatively short time? It's not possible. It's not possible to do that legally and above board. And yet, back to the question of, they must think we're stupid. Well, we must be. Because we allow this to happen. And we allow the media to tell us, hey, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And if you even question these, then, you're somehow traitorous, or you're crazy, or you're somehow the problem. And in a sense, we probably are the problem, and that we're dumb enough to keep putting these people in office. Those politicians that are just making bank like that, and live by a different set of rules. They exempt themselves from some of the laws they passed over the years, like ACA and stuff. They want to ban guns for everybody else, but they get armed security detail. They don't live by the same rules that they force on us. And yet we keep electing them. They're not in it for us. There's no way you go to Washington as a public servant and in a few years you're suddenly worth $30 million. Or you're worth $150 million because of your literally unprecedented ability to predict the stock market better than anyone or any computer model that's ever existed by a factor of 17 times. How do you look at that and say, yeah, that's legit? Oh, I'm sure she just got lucky. Every time. It's not possible, folks. And it's our tax dollars paying for all the shenanigans. But this Georgia thing had me fired up a bit, not gonna lie. I knew when we went to bed, I'm like, Georgia's not a blue state, as was shown in this past election. That one year, it just went blue in the dark of night, literally. The numbers weren't adding up, and everyone's looking around like, how did he get that many votes, like, in the middle of the night? It just doesn't make sense. And Trump still only barely lost. 11,000 votes in a state with 10.5 million people is not a lot. Like I said, it's less than 0.25%. And yet 315,000 votes that should not have been counted accidentally got counted, most of them in the Biden counter on the side of the spreadsheet. And we're supposed to believe that was an accident. And they denied it for years, and now they've gone, yeah, it happened. But we'll make sure it doesn't happen again. Don't trust us. It's too late. That is the literal definition of election fraud. When you knowingly break the rules to influence the outcome, that's fraud. And that happened. Last topic. Charlie Kirk haters. Not people that disagree with Kirk. Go ahead and disagree all you want. But I get so many stupid comments. And I had someone saying, look, you should be nice to the people. Stop calling them stupid. You're not going to convince them. And it's like, at some point, I don't want to convince an idiot. There's enough people that think one-dimensionally. Trump said, or not Trump, Kirk said guns are like cars, and that's crazy. And it's like, well, did you actually listen to the quote? Oh, I listened to the whole quote. It didn't change the context. And it's like, it did. You're not smart enough to understand what he was saying. Or you're just so vested in your current stance that you're not willing to consider that, you might be wrong. Just talking about guns. He didn't say guns are like cars. He just pointed out, you guys all want to get rid of guns because, well, they kill so many people. Well, 2/3 of the number is suicide, not murders or homicides. So the actual number of gun murders isn't 40-something thousand. It's more like 16 or 17,000, and most of that's gang drug related, and So the cars kill like 45,000 people a year, and injure and maim a lot more, do billions in property damage and medical coverage and injuries and all that stuff. And he's like, look, cars kill way more people than guns and do a lot more damage. But as a society, we're like, well, we're okay with it. And I say that with air quotes. It's an acceptable loss because look at all the benefits we get from having cars. And so as a society, we don't ban cars because as negative as they are and polluting the environment, depleting resources and all these other things, we still allow them. So on that sense, we are okay with it, because if we weren't, we would have gotten rid of them. By virtue of the fact that we're still here buying and using them says, on some level, whether we put it in those terms or not, we're okay with the deaths. We accept that every time I get on this or get my truck, you know, I could be one of them. And the fact that I get on the bike or I get in my truck and go for a drive says that on some level I'm accepting that that could be the outcome. Doesn't mean I'm happy about it. It doesn't mean I approve of it. And he certainly didn't. But people just take what someone else says and they try to project their own interpretation on it and then argue and rail against what they perceive that he said and not what he actually said. And that's the thing. When people say, oh, he said this, that's not what he actually said. That's not what he was talking about. You have to look at the bigger picture of the context of the conversation. We could be talking about alcohol. We could be talking about tobacco. There's all kinds of things that kill far more people than guns ever have or would. And yet we allow these products to be sold. We allow people to use those services, whatever it is we're talking about. You pick one, pick any one. It doesn't matter. We do so knowing that a bunch of people are going to die. How many people do we lose from heart disease, from bad food, diabetes, and tobacco and alcohol? Add those all up. It's in the millions compared to the 16,000, 17,000 gun homicides. Most of them committed by gangbangers and drug dealers using illegal guns anyway. Yet no one's, banning tobacco. Nobody's banning alcohol. And that was his argument. And you could say, yeah, well, he was arguing about, a tyrannical government. That wasn't necessarily his argument. He was talking about the founding fathers and why they put it in there. They figured that an armed populace would be less likely to be abused by the people they elected to govern them. When the people have the means to fight back, they're less likely to be victims. That means in your own home, when you've got a shotgun or an AR-15 and two guys kick in your door in the morning, you're less likely to be a dead victim if you have the means to protect yourself. A woman with a handgun on her is less likely to be the victim of rape. They might try, and then they may be dead, avoiding the actual rape part. Same thing for a country. If you look at all the dictators over the years, Trump's a dictator. No, he's not. He's elected and just doing things you don't like. But he's doing things within accordance of the law. That's not a dictator. That's probably my biggest problem with lefties, is that they just use words they don't understand that don't apply. But you've got just some of the things people say. I had someone trying to convince me that no, Kirk was openly for executing homosexuals. It's like, what are you talking about? You're coming up with this elaborate argument to justify why it was okay for one of your guys to murder him in front of his wife and kids. And it's all based on bullshit. He didn't agree with homosexuality because he's a strong Christian. But he was fine with people doing it. He just believed it was a sin, but he's like, whatever. He never abdicated violence to anybody. And certainly not gays, and certainly not women. He put women on a pedestal, felt men should step up and take care of women. But women who wanted to stay home and raise a family and not have to go to work. Let the husband provide and let the wife raise a family and be with her kids if she wants. He thought men should protect women more. You see women being assaulted or shit like that. Instead of a man, which 50 years ago would have stood in front of a bullet to protect a stranger, everyone just pulls out their cell phone to get some video. The guy preached nothing but love and peace. Whether you agree with his message or you agree with his religion, I don't. I'm not Christian. I disagree with him on abortion and gay marriage and other stuff. But I knew where he was coming from, and even though I disagreed with him and I felt he was wrong, there was nothing hateful about anything Charlie said. Biden said a lot of shit that I hated what he said. I hated his stance. I didn't hate the guy. And even though I think he was a complete buffoon and I hated his policies because of the damage they caused, Biden never said anything hateful. Just because I hated it, I'm the one introducing the hate. Not to him, but to the policy and the result of the policy. But just because you hate what Charlie Kirk said doesn't mean that what he said was hateful. Just as you being offended by what someone says doesn't mean that they were being offensive. Hateful and offensive require intent, a malicious intent, which he didn't have. If he says, look, the Bible says, this, and I just personally feel that people shouldn't be gay, and if you want to be trans, but don't expect me to go along with that. There's nothing hateful about that. Now, a person that is trans and suffering from that mental illness and is demanding that others validate them to make them feel better, I can see them hating him not doing that. I can see them being upset that he's not kowtowing to them and pandering to them, but he's not being hateful by virtue of the fact that they hate him. But when you're dealing with someone who's overly emotional and not really a critical thinker, they just react to stuff. They just scan the headline and react, and they don't actually read the details and the math or what's going on. They just react because it's a guttural, it's just a gut instinct. They just react to things. How do you counter that with logic? If they were logical, rational, well-thought people, you wouldn't be having that discussion in the first place. I disagreed with Kirk on several of his top, big platforms. So what? Doesn't mean I dislike him, doesn't mean I hate him, doesn't mean I think he's evil because I don't agree with him on everything. And that's the difference. Most conservatives are perfectly fine disagreeing with you. They'll sit there and chat for hours about it. And it doesn't turn mean, they don't try to cancel you, they won't shoot you. None of the shit that the left is doing lately. That's that's an important distinction between people. It's not just we do this, everyone's the same, we're just disagreeing. It's how you disagree. I'll hear some evangelical go off on things, and I'm just like, I kind of roll my eyes inwardly, like, whatever. But it's like, I don't hate them because I don't agree with them. And I don't accuse them of being hateful because I don't like what they're saying. I say things that you don't like. Doesn't mean I'm being hateful. I have different opinions. I'm basing them on different things, different experiences. Maybe it's just simple math, whatever. But to think that anything you don't like is automatically hateful, and anything you don't like is automatically a fascist, a Nazi, that's not true. You're calling me, or Kirk, or Trump, or whomever those things, so that you can justify anything from canceling up to assault and murdering them. You're labeling them something really horrific because in your mind you're saying, well, if it's that horrific, there's no defense for being a Nazi. You're right. There is no defense for being a Nazi. But none of the people you're accusing of being Nazis are Nazis. That's the difference. And so someone who thinks that it's okay to do that, and that's their go-to argument, how do you reason with that person when they've shown that they are beyond reason? When more than 50% of Democrats polled after the Kirk death ranged anywhere from cheering openly that he was murdered to, well, he deserved what he got, and that they feel that at least some of the time violence is applicable to speech you don't like. It boggles my mind. And there's a certain level of intellectual dishonesty that has to go with that. You know, there's just so many people that just are not informed. I see the stuff scrolling by on media, and it's like, yeah, we need to tax the billionaires, man. Dude, they're already paying the majority of the taxes. What are you talking about? And invariably, the person making the meme or argument is some dopey pothead that works at fucking McDonald's or something and doesn't pay taxes. They're in the bottom 50% of the workforce that pays a combined 2% of the entire federal tax bill. That's it. Half the country pays 2%. The top 1% pays 44%. The top 10% pays 76%. And the portion of the taxes they pay, because remember, we don't tax wealth. Wealth is what's left over after your taxes. We tax income. That's why it's in the name. The top 1% only makes 24% of the money, but they pay 44% of the taxes. So they're paying double the share that they represent when it comes to earnings. They're overpaying. If you wanted to be fair, I mean, if you wanted to say, look, everything should be fair. If you make 20% of the money, you got to pay 20% of the tax bill. But they don't do that. They pay more than that. And so, but people don't seem to know that. And when you point it out, they just go, oh, you're a bootlicker for the billionaires. No, the difference between you and I is I'm not a bootlicker. I can just do math. And you clearly can't, which is why you're poor and why you're not paying taxes, which means you have no skin in the game. And so you don't need to be educated on this. You have the luxury of being ignorant because someone much smarter and more successful than you is paying your share for you. Therefore, you have the luxury to be ignorant. You have the luxury to be stupid and oblivious to how the world works. Yet somehow feeling empowered that, you know, your voice matters. I offended somebody saying, you know what? If you don't pay taxes, I almost feel like you should be a homeowner or a taxpayer to vote. Because people who don't pay taxes, everything's free for them. There's no cost to them. If you don't own a home, you're not paying property taxes, yet your kids go to school on those property taxes that others are paying. If you're under a certain income, you don't really pay income taxes. You pay a couple grand during the year and you get most of that back in a refund because you got 2 kids and you're below this level. And so all the things you vote for, all the free shit, free healthcare, subsidy this, subsidy that, to you is free money. It's academic. It doesn't matter because it doesn't impact you at all. When the government says, all right, we're going to do this, you don't see a larger chunk of your paycheck taken away because you're not paying that to begin with. I am. And billionaires are paying more in a week than I'll pay in my entire lifetime. But that's the problem with living in a first world nation. We've allowed our education system to turn to shit intentionally. We use it for purposes of indoctrination. We have kids that are graduating that they're going to college and they're having to take remedial math and reading classes. They're not learning the basics of math and science and their native language that they've been speaking all their lives. They're not learning the basics of that. But they know climate change is real and men can have babies. And you don't think that's fucked up, and you don't think that that's intentional. You don't think that that's coordinated to create a dumbed down, stupid populace that's easy to manipulate, that has no idea how the world works, that has no skin in the game. So they are basically shielded from the consequences of their votes and their actions because they ain't the ones paying for it. So yeah, free shit sounds like a great idea. When you have to go buy something with your money, you have to go, is the enjoyment I'm going to get out of this worth what this is going to cost me? If you feel yes, you buy it. If you don't, you don't. Well, when you're not really paying taxes, you don't have that cost-benefit analysis. To you, it's a simple question of, do I get this free thing or don't I? It doesn't change the cost side of the equation on you, as far as you're concerned. So of course you're going to opt for it. And politicians know that. And they know that there's more of those people than the rich people. So they pit the have-nots against the haves to say, yeah, those rich guys over there are screwing you, and they're getting lavish tax cuts and all this other stuff, and government giving them money. And the average person is too stupid to know how a tax cut works. A tax cut isn't the government giving you money. It's not lavish. It's not the government's money to give. If every year I came to you and I grabbed your wallet, put a gun to your head, grabbed your wallet, and took out a $100 bill, and I did that for 5 years. And then the 6th year I came and I only took $90 out of your wallet. Did I give you $10, or did I just steal $10 less than I normally would? A Democrat will tell you that, hey, they just gave that guy $10. He didn't deserve that. Why didn't I get $10? Well, because they didn't give him anything. They just confiscated less. And because they're not confiscating anything from you, there's nothing to... I can't give you less than zero, right? I mean, you're not paying in the first place, so how do I give you a reduction? It's like giving someone, you got a 10% off sale. Why'd that guy get $200 off? Because he bought a lawn tractor. Well, what about me? Well, did you buy anything? No, not really. Well, then how would you get a 10% discount on the cost of this, of whatever, if you're not paying the cost for me to give you the discount to apply to? You know, when you put it in simple terms like that, I think the average person can wrap their mind around it, but I'm finding in talking to these idiots in the comment section that they don't. And I'm like, so then I just give up, and I'm just like, you know what, you're an idiot. Well, you shouldn't be like that. You're not going to win hearts and minds. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Because people that are that dumb and say the things that they're saying, I'm 99% sure are a lost cause anyway. If they don't get it by now, they're not going to. And me having to dumb it down and talk to them like a 4-year-old will have two outcomes. It'll make them angrier, and they'll just start lashing out. Or it'll still go over their heads. Like, so I'm just wasting my time trying to convince stupid people to stop being stupid. And nobody thinks of themselves that are stupid, but when the average person is only 20 points higher than retarded on the IQ scale, the average person isn't that bright. They're average. Some people are retarded. Some of us happen to be up in the gifted towards genius range. But the average is at 100. Retarded starts at 80. It's not that much of a difference. And no one thinks of themselves as that, but again, that's the math, that's the average. And most people are average. Some people are going to be lower, some people are going to be higher, but that's the average. And when you have an education system that actively dumbs down the population and doesn't teach them basic math, basic history, doesn't teach them how shit works, it teaches them a bunch of nonsense and critical race theory, and you can be a dragon or a dandelion, or men can have babies. And then you wonder why, as a society, we're barely functioning. Well, what do you think was going to happen if that's what you're teaching kids? But they do that because stupid people are much easier to scare. They're easier to manipulate for votes. And then there's politicians that are doing it. That's how they end up making $30 million in 3 years on a $170,000 government salary. And no one thinks to question it and go, huh. That's why lately I've just been like, I believe, like Kirk did, that talking's good, but we also saw at the same time where that got him. He was kind to a fault. He didn't yell at people. He didn't call names. He never called for violence. He turned the other cheek. Lots of times people were making death threats, throwing shit at him, spitting on him. He could have pressed charges. Cops asked him, do you want us to charge him? No. just make him stop, and he'd try to keep talking to the person. There was nothing hateful about that guy. And yet I got people saying, oh yeah, he wanted to execute all gay people. And they believe it. It's like, how can you believe something like that? Give me an example of where he said that. And not one single person has ever given me anything that's even in the ballpark. They ignore the question. They do a drive-by commenting and blurt out whatever dumb thing someone else told them to think, as if it was some profound mic drop moment that is completely fabricated and based in fantasy. And as soon as you go, you got any source for that? They run away like a little bitch. And that's why I'm having less and less patience with these idiots. I agree with Kirk and his thing about people need to talk and stuff. But at the same time, him talking and being the better person and turning the other cheek and trying to make a difference and giving a voice and a microphone and a platform to the people that disagreed with him, something they were never willing to give to him, that's why they murdered him. That's why they've shot at Trump. That's why they're shooting at ICE agents and you just see protests and riots. That's why there's more anti-Semitism in America today. The level of anti-Semitism today rivals the Third Reich in Nazi Germany. And it's rampant on our campuses and our politicians on the left. These aren't people that can be reasoned with. And so as much as I respected Kirk for what he was doing, his death kind of showed, in some ways, he showed the importance of it, but he also showed frankly, the futility of it. The other side doesn't want to talk. They believe their narrative and only their narrative. In that respect, they're no different than radical Islam and terrorists. You either believe as we do or we will destroy you by any means possible. And each time we sit back and do nothing and turn the other cheek, it emboldens them. Why wouldn't they? If there's no repercussions, if there's no retaliation, if there's no accountability, why not? Most people don't do horrible things in life because they're afraid of the retribution and the punishment. When you show that you're not willing to stand up and defend yourself and that there will be no punishment, that threat, that implied threat that keeps so many people in check doesn't work. You have maladjusted people who are grossly uneducated, some of them bordering on retarded, let's be honest. A lot of the people you're talking to probably have like a 94 IQ. They're 15 points higher than retarded, being in a special ed class. Yet they think they're normal, adjusted, intelligent people. They believe that, but they're not. It's like crazy people not understanding that they're crazy. That's part of it. But the deterrent of, hey, there's the law, I could get arrested, I could get punched in the mouth if I say that. If I push someone, they might punch me back. When that goes away, when that threat of, turn the other cheek is a good thing, but ultimately it led to Kirk's death. Because he showed the other side he wasn't going to fight and defend himself. And so they just kept upping the threats and the assaults and trying to get him shut down. And eventually one of them picked up a rifle and shot him in the neck. And then an alarmingly high number of Democrats openly cheered and or at least said, well, he got what was coming to him because of all the hateful things. Most of which they couldn't tell you what he said that was actually hateful. But they were told that what he said was hateful, and because he's a conservative and all conservatives are not, it's just this bullshit rhetoric that they believe that has no basis in reality. Politically, at the end of the day, on paper at least, most Republicans and most Democrats kind of want the same things. It's just their methods of going about it. There's one example, and then we'll wrap up here, of saying, look, we want more equality and less poverty. Well, both sides want that. The difference is the equality part. The Republicans are like, good, get government out of the way, let people earn more money, lower taxes, let them keep more of what they make, let them start a business, let them hire people. Yeah, we'll make a little money on taxes per person, but if we have more people working and making money, you'll make that up in volume. And so their method of equality is to try to raise more people up. Democrats' approach to when they say they want equality is, well, let's take the people at the top and let's take more of their money and knock them down to closer to the level of the people at the bottom. They don't raise the people on the bottom up. One is a bottom raising up approach. The other is a top pulling them down approach. So while they say they're for equality, and I guess in a weird way they kind of are, what that equality means and how they mean to get it is quite a bit different. Anyway, I've covered a lot of ground, and from talking loud, it's cold, so my nose is a little runny and my throat's getting sore. So there's your politics. Haven't done it in a while, but between the Epstein files coming out and it mainly serving to implicate nobody but liberals and all the shit they said Trump was going to be and there wasn't, to the point they had to create and doctor an existing image from something else to make it look like it was part of it. Holy shit. And the media went with it. Didn't even bother to fact check it. And now they all look stupid and they're realizing, oh, well, this is from a beauty pageant. They were all adult women who said he was nothing but a gentleman to them and had nothing to do with Epstein. Come on, man. If you haven't watched Wag the Dog, you need to. It's a playbook for exactly what's going on right now between the left side of the political aisle and our media. It's eerie. It's eerie how it's real life. It's going on and you can see it. Anyway, go watch my watch stuff. Everybody have a good one. I'm off all week, so and it's supposed to be like mid-70s this week and sunny. I'm off till the end of the year. So I'm going to get some mountain rides in this weekend. So we'll get some mountain rides without me yapping about politics, if that is your preference. Stay tuned. We'll see y'all later.